We are live. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jody, not Sue, subbing in for Sue today. And we're here today with Josh Stevens, who is a veteran teacher and college counselor based in Los Angeles. He's also a member of the Overseas Association for College Admissions Counseling and the Independent Educational Consultants Association. And, I know it's May and we're looking at the end of the year. But it's been a year like no other, and we're really talking today about rising juniors and what the college landscape looks like and what advice Josh has for them moving forward, since this is, he's been studying this and carefully keeping track of it. So I thought we'd start, and if you have any questions also at any time, just put them in the comments and we'll try. There we go. Okay, good. Sorry, I lost my video for a second. That the junior year sometimes feels like the most stressful year. And so one of our goals today too is hopefully that to leave you from this interview with some, a little bit of confidence and a little ways to support your rising juniors so that they feel a little bit less stressed and a little bit more confident about what they have ahead of them. So let's just get right to it. Welcome, Josh. Thanks for joining us.
Jody, thanks for having me, and thanks to Susan Borison for inviting me, and to Jessica for managing things behind the scenes.
Yeah. So, there was so much talk about how the pandemic would affect college admissions. And now that we've completed one admission cycle, what can you tell us? Like, what did you, I can't say what trends, but what happened? What's some of the results?
Yeah, Jody, a lot happened. And I think a lot of it took almost everyone by surprise. Then again, in college admissions, surprise is part of the landscape. We like to have control over our lives and so forth. But no matter what year it is, part of admissions and part of applying to college is you do your best in school, you live your life, you assemble the best applications you can based on who your experiences are, and you send them off. And you have to trust that everything's going to work out for the best, that people in offices on campuses that could be thousands or hundreds of miles away are doing what they believe is best for their institutions, and that even if any given decision doesn't seem right or is disappointing or is exciting, exciting surprise, you have to accept that there are uncertainties and that this is a process that we don't control. Students don't control it, parents don't control it, college counselors, whether they're independent like myself or they're in schools, a lot of it's out of our control. But the most important thing in any year is to keep the long-term in mind and to keep the aggregate in mind. Students are always going to be applying to multiple colleges. They'll get into some, they won't get into others. Every year you hear some story of some kid getting into 12 Ivy League schools. There's only 8 of them, of course, but or whatnot. Those are super anomalies for the most part. Everyone gets in. Point is, everyone's going to get in somewhere, and everyone's going to have a great college career, and we can talk about that more separately. But I just want to lay the groundwork for saying that yes, this year was unusual. Yes, there were many things out of our control, but that lack of control is an inherent part of college admissions. Specifically, what happened? At the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of people, and this includes college admissions officers who spoke publicly, this includes college counselors who were talking among themselves, a lot of us initially expected there might be a drop-off in admissions, that fewer people might apply in the aggregate for a few reasons, primarily financial. When at the beginning of the pandemic, things really crashed and affected people, across the economic spectrum. We also felt that the travel restrictions and the anxiety about contagion and so forth might keep people closer to home, and therefore, and so forth. And then we just didn't know. We knew that kids couldn't visit colleges, and that the college research process was going to be disrupted, and maybe that would limit applications because kids would only apply to schools they already knew. And not apply to schools that they otherwise might have visited or so forth. And so as it turns out, none of those things happened. So first, I'll acknowledge on the economic front, we live in such a stratified society economically. We know that some people are really struggling, but many people found the opposite. A lot of upper middle class and wealthier families saw their stock portfolios rise and their jobs weren't disrupted, and they ended up with more money in the bank and therefore more ability to pay for tuition. So that didn't happen. In terms of the research, people just went ahead and applied. Maybe sight unseen, but kids ended up applying to at least as many, if not more colleges than usual. And I think if they applied to more, it's because things were uncertain and they wanted to cast a wider net. So rather than say, oh, I haven't seen that school, I'm not going to apply, they'll say, I haven't seen that school, I'm going to apply to it and 3 others.
Right.
And then see what happens. The biggest factor, though, and I think, as I recall, nobody was initially predicting this, was the dropping of standardized testing. The vast majority of colleges went test optional, which means you are not required to submit SAT or ACT. And some even went test blind, which means you could have written your SAT score in skywriting above the campus and they would ignore it and just simply not factored in, the UCs being the most prominent.
Right.
MIT announced that very early. So what that meant in particular is that students who in a normal year might have been restricted by their SAT scores. They might have had a school that's appealing to them, but they might have looked at the average scores and they'd know, you know what, my score is 200 points below their average, not even worth it. If that factor goes away and that student's grades are pretty good and they feel good about their activities and so forth, they may have gone ahead and applied. So the result is the applicant pools at any given colleges rose substantially, some by 10%, which is a lot, some by 20%, some by 40%. Some schools even had 100% increases. Colgate is one off the top of my head, who doubled their applicant pool this year. What does that mean? It's math. It means that admission rates plummeted. The ultra selective schools that used to be at like 6 or 7% are now went below 4%. The merely highly selective schools that were at 10%, they're down to 7%, and so on and so forth. So that's the raw situation. Now, the postscript to this is the people who got admitted, the people who are going to attend these schools, do those pools end up looking very different from they would have in other years? Not necessarily. It may very well be that the same kids who got in this year would have gotten in previous years, and that increased applicant pool, those might have been students who ended up, maybe they were weaker, maybe they wouldn't have been considered. At the same time, I'm sure there are some kids who did get admitted and are really excited to be admitted, and the college are excited to admit them in large part because of the relaxed testing requirements. And there may have been kids who are awesome, but just, the stupid SAT. So I'll stop there.
Okay. Yeah, I think those are really good points. And especially what you said about, the uncertainty and, and every given year kids are going to get in and they're not going to get in. It is not as cut and dry as if you deserve to get in, you're going to get in. And our whole, we just had a series, our destination college, and that was something that so many of our other experts kind of featured, that it's just, you just don't know. There are a lot of really great kids, and that doesn't mean you're not great if you don't get in. So all right, I'm going to switch it up here a little bit, but I want to ask you this question: does it really matter where you go to college?
Great question. The short answer is no. I could answer that in so many ways. The first thing I'll say, and I say this to my students as often as I can. So obviously I support my students. College counselors should. If students have favorite schools, if they have places they've done their research and they feel good about it, obviously they should strive for those schools. Obviously, you've got to go somewhere. You can't go to 4,000 colleges all at once. So yes, you should have favorites and all the rest. And, if those schools are competitive, and you're applying to a highly selective school, you need to have a reason for it, right? You need to have a reason why you feel like that school is genuinely appropriate for you and appealing to you, beyond just some vague notion of prestige or ranking or so forth. Because why would you go through the trouble of applying to a school with a 8% admission rate when you could apply to a school with a 30% admission rate? Unless you've got a really good reason, why you feel like you match up with that more selective school. Fundamentally, a student's performance in college, a student's personal ambition, a student's intellectual curiosity, a student's awareness of the world, potentially a student's career goals, although I'm not sure 18-year-olds need to have like super solid career goals. Some do, some don't. All of those things, they're the way they get along with people, all of those things are much bigger factors in people's long-term success than the mere college they go to. And a student who goes to a less selective school, but crushes it and gets great grades and has great relationships with professors, I see this all the time. They can get great jobs, they can get into great grad schools and live great lives, make great friends, the whole deal. And you can go to a prestigious, highly selective school and slack off or be overwhelmed, or be intimidated, or just, decide to party too much and not do well. And, who knows what your life prospects are. So ultimately, I want to remind everyone, sure, be ambitious with college, strive for colleges that you're really excited about, but don't forget that ultimately this all depends on you as the student. And that applies academically and socially and, professionally and all the rest. I would also say that, we have so many colleges in the United States, and they all have pluses and minuses, and they all have attributes. And I always encourage students, go for the attributes, the actual substance that you're looking for in college. And when you do that, then you'll invariably find many schools that hit your personal criteria. Some of those might be highly selective, some might not be. And you get in where you get in. And I think the final point I'll make is that I get really anxious and wary when students say they have like a dream school. Usually when they say that, it's a prestigious school, it's a highly selective school, to which my response is, well, what does that mean? Does that mean if you don't get into that one dream school, that you're going to give up on life, that the rest of your life is ruined because that one school that has a 5% admission rate, and you don't know what kind of mood the admissions person is in the morning they read your application, that you're going to bank your hopes and dreams on that arbitrary decision? That doesn't make sense. We've got plenty of opportunities in life.
Yeah, it's so hard. And I really have sympathy, because I think we also send some mixed messages to our kids. You got to choose, you have to decide where you want to go, but then it's like, but don't decide too much, because if you don't get in there, you have to, so it is such an emotional roller coaster. And, and again, where they're trying to take such, so much information and apply it to themselves when they don't know themselves that well, maybe too.
Mm-hmm.
So. All right. Well, let's get on, and we're going to talk maybe specifically about questions specific to our rising juniors. So these are sophomores who are just finishing the year. And I just want to share a quick story. I have one of my children who, was the most interested in the college search, and actually during his junior year did a lot of searching for colleges, and then had picked where he thought he wanted to apply. And then the summer between junior and senior year, so he realized that he did it all wrong, and that wasn't where he wanted to go. And so, as we talk about this, I think we have to remember that our kids change so much over the span of a year. So but as we think about this for these rising juniors, so you already mentioned testing. And I believe just last week, UC said that they're not going to use tests at all to determine admissions, only for scholarships.
Not just say a court compelled them.
Oh, okay. So they are.
Yeah.
So, test optional is not going away. So now what? Usually this would be a time where maybe there would be some test prep in the summer or this or that. What should these rising juniors be doing in regards to testing?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And the timing is exactly right for that question about testing, about whether to take testing, about what scores you might aim for, about how to prepare for it. So the first thing about testing is that I think it has always gotten more attention than it deserves, even in normal times. And it has especially gotten more stress than it deserves. I think that the time people spend on prep has often been overblown. I think the money people spend on prep has often been inflated. And I think the role of testing, here's what's good about testing. It's something that can that a student can control to an extent. Whatever your grades you got as a first semester sophomore, those grades are what they are. They're on your transcript. They're not going anywhere. A test score, your test score is whatever it is when you sit for the next exam, whether that's a 900 or a 1550. So I think that's one good reason why people focus on testing, because they can, you can control it. The previous rule of thumb was that a test score never gets you into college, no matter how. A 1600 doesn't get you in anywhere. But a low score can certainly keep you out. So if you're applying to, Michigan with a 1050, it's, very, very unlikely. But if you have a 1600, that doesn't mean you get into Michigan. It just means that you have checked that particular box because you're over a certain threshold that they expect. So as far as this year goes, normally what I would say is, back in the day when kids were required to take the SAT or ACT, you start with a tiny bit of studying to orient yourself to the test, or you take the PSAT, and then you take a full practice exam. And you get a sense of what this exam feels like, what all the sections are like, and you get a sense of your baseline score. And then you can decide, okay, what might be a reasonable score to aim for? And then maybe you do some prep. And for me, the first prep that I recommend is do the stuff that's free. Look at Khan Academy, do those lessons. They've got dozens of lessons out there that are keyed specifically to the tests. You can buy a prep book for $20. You can do the exercises, you can do the practice tests, and so on and so forth. And students who are ambitious and diligent and with it and treat it like a fun challenge, I think it can be a fun challenge, they can prep completely adequately with those resources without going to prep classes or tutors or so forth. Some students, however, need the structure or the explanations and so forth. The twist this year, of course, is that when you take that initial practice exam or diagnostic exam, different terminology, the question then becomes, okay, what did I get on that practice test? What do I think I can achieve with some reasonable studying? Studying does not dominate your life and, distract you from all the other important things, including having fun and having a decent summer. And can my potential score match up with essentially the average scores of the colleges that I might want to apply to? If that is the case, if you think you're in range of a college's average scores, then I think it's worthwhile to study for the tests and go ahead and take it, because that will then help you, or at least reinforce your credentials. If you know that there is no way that your starting score is low, or you're not a good test taker, or that the studying would be absolutely miserable or counterproductive, and you're not going to hit a score that's going to be an asset to you, then just don't take it. And that's a great gift in this world. What that means, of course, is that if colleges don't have that data point of a test, it means the other elements of your application become that much more important. So now if you've got a great GPA at a school that has a rigorous curriculum, and you are more than happy to let that GPA be the foundation of your application absent test scores, that's great. You may be in great shape. But however, if your GPA is on the lower end and you might hit a test score that might actually sort of be relatively better than your GPA, that may be reason to go ahead and take the tests. In terms of timing, the timing is a little bit tricky. Ideally, you would take it in the spring of junior year. And I say that rather than say fall of junior year, because you're still learning, right? You're in math classes, you're writing English essays, you're getting grammar lessons. The things you're learning in school will, to an extent, apply to the tests. So if you take it in April of 11th grade, you're that much smarter and more knowledgeable than you would be in September 11th grade. With that said, there's also a huge benefit in getting the test out of the way. So if you think that you can get a strong score by September or October of 11th grade, and that's very few kids, but if you're one of those kids, do it. Get a great score, get it out of the way, forget about it, and so forth. On the other, but otherwise you sort of want to plan and just, give yourself adequate time to prep without driving yourself crazy. but without, pushing it too far into senior year.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into my next question, and you kind of touched on it, is kind of the coursework for junior year. I feel like junior year kind of has this big, I don't know, asterisk around it that it's the hardest year. And a lot of times it's because kids are piling up on AP courses or maybe IB or whatever. And without testing, are we going to see more of that? Or what, what's your advice for these rising sophomores where places aren't going to be looking at tests and, so they have to look at other things? What should they be doing for their courses? Which I don't know if that's that much different than what they should have ever been doing, but what do you suggest?
Right. So you're right. There is this notion that junior year is the hardest year or the most important year. That's true. It just is. Your transcript is always the most important part of your application. And junior year being the most proximate year to your application deadline, obviously a grade as a junior is more important than a grade as a freshman. With that said, I think a lot of what makes junior year tough is not the actual course material. It's often at some high schools, the atmosphere. Students often talk to me about the pressure they feel or the competition they experience. And I always try to remind them that pressure, competition, those are artificially created. Those aren't from teachers. Those aren't from the textbooks. Those aren't from the rubrics. That's usually from students talking to each other, or often parents and students. And the first thing I'll advise everyone as they approach junior year is try to be upbeat, try to maintain a positive attitude, try not to get caught up in discussions about grades, try not to worry about what the person to your left and your right is getting on a given test. Stay within yourself. If you want to be competitive with yourself because you love to learn and you want to see how much you can cram into your brain, that's awesome. But don't worry about what other people are doing or thinking. Be a positive influence on yourself, be a positive influence on your classmates. The more upbeat people are, the better people are going to feel, and B, the better people are going to do. I think that there are a few people who thrive on competition. I think the vast majority of people are often dragged down by it. So no matter what happens junior year, be upbeat. Be excited about learning, right? You're probably taking awesome classes, hopefully with awesome teachers. Get excited about that and about embracing that as much as possible. Don't think of it in competitive terms. Now, in terms of the courses you choose, colleges respect rigor. So traditionally, an honors class is more rigorous than an AP, and an AP is more rigorous than an honor, or rather, an honors class is more rigorous than a regular, and an AP, and so forth. So to the extent that you want to challenge yourself, you should, but you don't want to challenge yourself to the point of undermining yourself. You want to be realistic about, hey, there are 4 APs I want to take, but I know that more than 3 might be too tough. There's your answer, right? If for whatever reason you have such a capacity that you can take 6 APs and 1 honors class, that's great, go for it, but be mindful of it. And if you're taking all regular classes, that's fine too, if that matches your level and your ambitions. The other great, so in that sense, yes, if you're, from the pure college perspective, strive for rigor, but not overloading. The other part of this, though, is that the great thing about junior year, and even more about senior year, is you often have more choices. The 9th and 10th grade curricula are often very set. 11th grade might give you more options, different kinds of math classes, a wider range of APs and honors, and so forth. And that's a point at which you can really choose classes based on what you really like. So if you're going to choose an AP, choose it in the subject that you really enjoy the most. And what that does is, A, hopefully you'll really enjoy the class, but B, it can signal to colleges, hey, I'm taking AP European history because I love European history. And I'm taking regular chemistry because, well, I'm not a chemistry person, but that's okay, because I'm going to be really proud of AP Euro and I'm going to love learning it. And when I become a history major in college, I'm going to really all set.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great advice. And, chances are you're going to be putting more time into those classes. So you may as well like what you're doing instead of feeling like you're doing it just so you can get into college, which, as we said at the beginning, is not a sure thing. So, or it is a sure thing you're going to get into college, but it's not a sure thing that, okay.
Right.
All right. We have time for maybe one more question. And since we're in May here, and, what about the summer? Okay. What should these rising juniors, how should they be spending this summer in particular, especially after our last year and moving, ahead? What can they do?
My first advice is get out of the house. As long as you're comfortable and vaccinated and you're in a safe place, explore the world. I mean, for these sophomores, we can all argue about who's had a tougher time of the pandemic, but they've been indoors during really 15 formative months of their life, and they haven't explored their cities and they haven't gotten out and seen people. I think that being worldly is a really important element. So I'm telling my students, hey, plan a family day trip somewhere, get out into your city, go do a restaurant crawl, whatever, anything to get out, go. I think people have been taking hikes because that's the one thing we have been doing, but I think go have some of those urban experiences that have been lacking recently. I think that's really important, just to reorient yourself to the world. Otherwise, sort of traditional summer activities really run the gamut. Some kids will do volunteer work. Some kids will take summer classes. Some kids get jobs. What I tell people, if all else fails, buy a pile of books and read those books. To me, that's potentially the most important thing a kid can do, is just learn on their own. There's a great book about everything. There are multiple great books about everything. I think that, do some projects, get some hobbies, get together with other friends and shoot off model rockets or build some benches in the park or literally almost anything. I think that, for students who want to do something academic, I think summer classes are great, whether it's an online class at community college or even just like a Coursera course, anything that keeps their mind going. One twist this year, and I've thought about this recently, is sometimes kids get jobs, right? They work at a coffee place, they're lifeguards, they work at a country club and, pick up golf balls and whatever. Obviously, if they're of age. Interestingly, this year, we know there's a labor shortage, right? There are more jobs than there are workers. For a student who is eager to earn an honest dollar and to get out in the world, they may find that there are a lot of jobs available. So I would definitely think about that, especially, if they genuinely want and need to make money.
Right.
Colleges absolutely respect that sort of thing.
Yeah. We were just talking yesterday too on our behind the scenes, just how, these jobs, these also there's a real fun element too, that you're just learning stuff, you're doing things on your own. And, there was a lot of reminiscing about some really good jobs that people had when they were teens.
Totally.
And their teens have. So, yeah. So, well, and it's nice too, because I think you're hitting at it, these the rising juniors or these sophomores have a little bit of a reentry, and the summer's going to be a great time to do it so they can set themselves up for what comes too. So, okay. Yeah. All right. Any last words, Josh, before we sign off for today?
Last word, as I was preparing for this and thinking specifically about sophomores, it occurred to me that one other unique thing these sophomores have experienced or will experience when they go back to school, if they haven't already. Schools are big on institutional memory. You're only in school for 4 years, but traditions get passed down from class to class to class. And now we have this big gap. And I encourage rising juniors, when they get back to high school, to really seize the opportunities they have. There might be clubs that have gone dormant. There might be traditions that have, are almost on the verge of being forgotten. I think it's up to those juniors, especially because the seniors are going to be crazy with college applications in September. It's up to those juniors to seize those opportunities, revive those clubs, talk to the teachers about, okay, what did we used to do 3 years ago or 2 years ago? Start new traditions, but really, of course, embrace being at school. There's a stereotype that school's a drag, but I think kids are going to find, or if they've already found, school's amazing, right? There are people and friends, and you're learning stuff, and so many resources. And there's sports and arts and activities, and I hope that juniors will embrace that and just love being back at school and love all the opportunities they have, and really make the most of it. I think that's, and that it's sort of a cool moment, to sort of rediscover what's awesome about school.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. And also you have it with the perspective, it's a different perspective now. Instead of like, oh, I have to do this, it's I get to do this,
Yeah.
they've already couldn't get to do it before. So now they're really full on. So we did have one comment here from Randy. She said, this was really helpful. Is this recorded so I can show my teen? And the answer to that is yes. You'll be able to see this on our Facebook page. And I think we're even going to put it on an Instagram so you can find it there on your teen. So we're glad. And Josh, I want to thank you so much. There's so many things that we could talk about. Sorry about that. One of my own children calling me because he doesn't know my schedule. I'm waiting for the dog to come in now just to complete the trifecta today. So anyway, I want to thank you. And, I've said these are crazy times, but I think, I'm sensing there is this hope and there's so much possibility. So let's just hold on to that as we move forward. So that's it for today. Thanks so much, Josh. And we'll be back tomorrow. Oh, we got one more comment too. Oh, somebody else is going to listen to this with her family. So I'm glad to hear that. Okay. All right.
Well, Jody, thank you. Thanks to Sue. And anyone who has further questions, feel free to track me down. I'm Josh at joshrstevens.net.
Okay. We'll put that in the comments too of people that are, so he has that. Okay. All right. Great. Okay. Thanks, Josh. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, everybody.